שלום מבית הפרלמנט של בריטיש קולומביה בבירת הפרובינציה בוויקטוריה. 212 ימים בשבי חמאס, 132 חטופים. אנחנו בעצרת למען ישראל שנערכת כאן. פעם ראשונה משדרים מוויקטוריה.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, good people, for being here despite the precipitation. How many here realtors this job? Good. Well, we want you to well informed, we want you to be accepted, and then we want you to go tell your friends. And thank you to the amazing leaders and organizers of the Greater Victoria Christian community. Bill, can you give a wave? And Edie? They join us again today, as they always have, as we join them. And they're planning the next rally in this series. That'll be on the 9th of June. So mark that in your calendars. It might even be drier. But with January, whatever, we'll take what we get. So this is a rally for Israel. It's a rally for truth, for peace, for democracy, for justice, and for love. We hate no one. We desist from hateful speech or actions. We support human rights for everyone. To us, the death or injury of any innocence is deplorable. The death or injury of any innocence is deplorable. Your presence here today says enough. Stop the hateful rhetoric. Respect the peace of Canada and the peace of Victoria. Mob rule must not be allowed to persist. You inveterate people that come out regardless of the weather, and most of you well prepared for it, I see. You represent the silent majority. You see evil intent. Your support of Israel is support to peace and justice everywhere. We have a remarkable lineup of speakers for you today, as well as musical interludes from, as you heard, very accomplished musicians. Feedback from you who attended this series of rallies, the 18th of February, the 17th of March, and now today, and next one we know the 9th of June, have consistently told us that this is the format that you like. We're always open to comment and looking for ways to improve these events. Tell your friends. Now, here comes some important instructions to guide our behavior. You've heard it before. My friends, be alert. There may be pro-Hamas supporters around or even amongst us. They may attempt to provoke us to depart from our peaceful ways. Don't be the fish that takes the bait. Don't be the fish that takes the bait. Please do not react to any provocation. Our friends, the police, are here to ensure that everyone can exercise their constitutional rights in peace and safety. Help yourself and your friends to resist pro-Hamas provocations. If you must, just walk away. If you're at all concerned, walk towards the nearest police officer. Thank you again for being present to show your support for Israel and for peace. Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Israel Chai.
Police are down here to our south, our north rather, to our north.
And we really appreciate the police being here. Our first speaker is Ian Ward. Ian is presently a city councillor in Colwood with an eye to federal politics. Ian is also a supporter of Israel and Canada's Jewish community. He's been attending rallies and speaking out on social media and in real life since October 7th. Ian recently returned from Israel, where he saw some of the sights of October 7th, and he was there the night Iran fired missiles and drones. We welcome Ian. Ian.
Trying to get as close to you as I can without being right in the rain here. Thank you to everybody who's here today. I hope you can hear me. As I was introduced, my name is Ian Ward. I am a elected city councillor in the city of Colwood, just across the water there, and a candidate applicant for the Federal Conservative Party in Esquimalt Saanich Sooke for our next federal election. Thank you. And I would add, as was said, I just returned from Israel a couple weeks ago, delayed somewhat by an Iranian sending off party, but happy to be here with you today. So I am here today in solidarity with the Jewish community, both in Canada and across the diaspora, but especially in Israel. And I'm here to speak about three specific facts we must confront and that Canadians must confront. The first fact is that sadly I shouldn't be here. And I say that not because I don't wish to be, and not because I haven't been a strong voice in support of the Jewish community in Israel, but because as a low-level municipal politician, I should be just one voice in a chorus. I should be relegated to the proverbial back row while senior politicians from higher levels of government stand up in front and take the lead in reaffirming British Columbia and Canada's commitment to our friendship with Israel and to our shared commitment to democracy, values, and human decency. However, as we know, a shocking absence of moral clarity has seen our political leaders abdicate the moral high ground and cede our educational institutions and streets to mob rule and to a foreign-funded rabble that espouses values of hate, intolerance, and falsehoods. It is an unfortunate fact that post-October 7th, the unspoken is now being spoken, and our political institutions have become party to anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment. The examples are many, but perhaps the most concerning for me was the federal NDP tabling a blatantly anti-Semitic motion against the state of Israel, pardon me, wet pages stick together, to end its ability to fight back against Iran and its murderous proxies Hamas and Hezbollah. If every other G7 nation followed suit, the genocidal chant from the river to the sea would become a reality. As freedom-loving Canadians, we cannot allow this to happen, and we will not allow this to happen. The second fact I wish to confront you with today is the myth of settler colonialism in Israel. It's an everyday occurrence now to hear the anti-Jewish protesters falsely conflating North American indigenous issues with the Jewish presence in Israel. This is a false narrative. It is a false equivalency with colonial issues in North America. The reality is, unlike colonials in North America, there has always been a documented Jewish presence maintained in the land we know as Israel. My travels in Israel, I traveled from the north, in the Golan Heights, down through Galilee and Tiberias, Jerusalem, and into the western Negev. In Jerusalem, I spent my first Shabbat, I'm not Jewish, but I am a Zionist, at the Western Wall, a part of the retaining wall for the Temple Mount built between 19 and 70 BCE. This holy site is evidence of thousands of years of Jewish presence, and is just one of many indisputable connections the Jewish people have to their ancestral lands. Throughout the Holy Land, there is evidence of a continued Jewish presence that dates back thousands of years. And while post-World War II, for obvious reasons, diaspora Jews returned home to safety, the fact is that at no point did the Jewish people ever willingly relinquish their claim to their lands. That's right. Consider also that Jewish texts and prayers and many Jewish holidays predate the destruction of the Second Temple. They all evoke the yearning to return to Zion, with the Passover Seder culminating in the song, and I'm going to butcher the Hebrew here, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. To conflate the return of ostracized, stateless European Jews and Jews from Africa and elsewhere with the colonial narrative belies an understanding of the facts. In fact, a high-level indigenous leader that was with me on this trip spoke thusly: Israel is the opposite of a colonial state. It is indeed a glowing example of an Indigenous success story. And this is from an Indigenous leader, a high-ranking Indigenous leader in Canada, and she said, you know, this is an Indigenous success story, and the fact is that Israel has and always will be the rightful homeland of the Jewish people. The last fact I speak of today is the false notion, again, of Israel as an apartheid state. The anti-Israel movement we see in our streets and on our campuses falsely claims that this is a white versus brown or white versus black issue, a la South Africa in the 80s or 90s. This is patently false. The families of most Israeli Jews come from the Middle East, Africa, Asia, some from Europe. They can neither be described as white nor strictly European. Let us remember that apartheid is an Afrikaans word meaning apartness that defines South Africa's system of racial segregation. A legal, enforceable, and institutionalized separation of black, white, and mixed-race peoples. Separate schools, beaches, bathrooms, consistent with the segregation and civil rights era American South. By stark contrast, Israel is a participative and inclusive democracy, one where all minority groups receive equal protection under the law. Alongside Jewish Israelis, Arab Israelis, Druze, Christians, Bedouin, and others vote, study, work, live, and serve in the Knesset, military, and every facet of Israeli society. On my travels through Israel, I met with Israeli Arabs who extolled the virtues of life in Israel. In the north, I was surprised to learn that of 93 local governors, 57 are Arab, and of the population in the north, 56% of residents in Israel's north are Arab. Consider that, in the north of Israel, with a population of 1.6 million residents, Jewish Israelis are in fact the minority in their democracy. The facts are clear. Israel is not an apartheid state, and we must reject this nonsensical narrative. Yay. Those are the three facts, but lastly, I just want to leave you with my personal observations from my recent and first trip to Israel. I had the good fortune to meet many people and to visit some extraordinary projects in tandem with organizations here in Canada, like the Jewish Federation, like the Shalva Center for People with Disabilities, and the brand new Museum of Tolerance opening soon in Jerusalem. However, what impacted me the most, obviously, was seeing firsthand the impact of October 7th. That day remains raw and visceral for Israelis, and almost everyone I met had been touched in some way by that day. Mothers with children, a child in the army, cousins, fathers, brothers, sisters, young people who lost friends at the Nova Festival, families of those taken to Gaza clinging to hope. And most devastating of all for me was the connection to home. At Kibbutz Kfar Azah, a quiet but welcoming survivor and resident, Chen Kotler, shared her personal story and walked me through the devastation of her picturesque garden community. Home after home damaged, bullets, RPGs, rocket fire, most still emblazoned with red paint from the IDF teams that identify a body or bodies found within. We stopped at her neighbor and best friend's home where a pride flag still flies on the pole out front. And I learned to my horror that this was the place where Canadian peace activist Vivian Silver was brutally taken and murdered by the very people she devoted her life to helping. Later that day, I choked back tears walking the site of the Nova Music Festival, bearing witness to the indiscriminate slaughter of over 330 young people dancing under an open sky. I lit a candle with friends and we prayed with two rabbis at the spot where Vancouver's Ben Mizrahi perished, helping an injured friend. I say that I was there to bear witness because I know that we must do so. We are already seeing October 7th denialism emerging, and we must ensure that we protect the memory of those who died by speaking facts. Facts about Israel, facts about the Jewish people, facts about that horrific day, and the indisputable fact that Israel may have bent, but it is not broken. And it will be here as the home state for the Jewish people for thousands of years to come. Thank you all for continuing the good fight. Am Israel High.
Thank you very much, Ian Ward. We want to thank all of you for being here on such a terrible day in terms of weather. You've been so wonderfully attentive and receptive and kind, and we really appreciate it, so thank you. Our next speaker is Rabbi Harry Brechner. He's been the spiritual leader of Congregation Emmanuel for nearly 25 years. Rabbi Harry is originally from Long Island, New York, but he came to Victoria by way of New Orleans with his young family. Just days after Rabbi Harry arrived, 9/11 happened, and he organized an interfaith service. Rabbi Harry remains committed to interfaith outreach. Rabbi Harry has lived and studied in Israel. He was also a combat medic with the IDF. Rabbi Harry, please.
Kol hakavod, respect to all of you guys who are out here in this kind of nasty weather, especially those who I saw at the Yom HaShoah commemoration. So we've been spending a lot of time outside. I hope you're feeling warmer in your bones. You know, I lived about a decade plus of my life in Israel. Lots of family and close friends are there, and they're suffering. And I think first thing I want to say is it's time for the hostages to be home.
Yes.
And I want them to come home as whole as they possibly can, because it's just been too long. And there's no longer waiting. We need this to happen. And I also want to say that I think that the escalation of violence all around, it just needs to stop.
Amen.
We need to be able to stop the violence. We need to be able to bring home the hostages. And we need to find a pathway together with the Palestinians to figure this out. My sense is that, yes, we're pro-Israel. I hope you're also pro-Palestinian, because that's being pro-peace. This isn't about one side or the other. This isn't a binary situation. If you take the route that we're two indigenous people who've come together in this piece of land, we have to figure it out together. Reb Zalman once taught the only way to get it together is together. This past Shabbat, from the book of Leviticus, we learn that if we're not deeply moral in the land, any people in the land, including us, then the land will vomit us out. We can't allow that to happen. We have to find a level of deep ethics and constancy. And that means that we don't delegitimize anyone. As things that are happening to us, okay, we're strong, we're going to get through this. Half of world Jewry lives in Israel. We're not going anywhere. But we can't continue. And I think I'm going to say something that might not be very popular, but I know, kind of deep in the cells of my being, that somehow we have this crazy destiny with the Palestinian people. And we're connected, whether we like it or not. And we have to figure out a way together to move forward, to have a sense of shalom. Once the hostages are home, once the violence stops, then what? What are we hoping for in our heart? Right? It's not about a zero-sum game. I think that there's enough abundance, and I really believe the divine source will give to us what we need to figure out a way forward.
Yep.
Every time I'm in dialogue with Palestinians locally or Palestinian friends in Israel and Palestine, the one piece that we all seem to agree upon is that neither people have the leadership that we deserve. Neither people have leadership that have a vision of what can be and how we can flourish together. I can tell you that as a veteran of the First Lebanon War, Shlom Galil, someone who served in Jenin, Hebron, southern Lebanon, 40 years ago, nothing significant has yet to change. We cannot continue on this path. And I know how painful it is. You know, I know that when I see the slogans from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, how would we feel if it just said from the river to the sea, Palestinians must be free? How would we feel if we should all be free? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a narrative that doesn't look at the binary. It's not saying it's pro-Israel, anti-Palestine, anti-Israel, pro-Palestine. It's time for us to figure out letting go. The past, our narrative is painful for Palestinians. The Palestinian narrative is painful for us. We cannot change the past. All we can do is put hopes and concerns and love into the present and the future to figure out how to walk forward, how to have a pathway to peace. That's why I've come here to say I'm a proud Zionist. I've also been a peace activist most of my adult life. And I know it's hard. Right now, I know that most of us, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, whether you're a Jewish brother or sister, or whether you're friends who really support the Jewish people and Israel, that sense of pain from October 7th, it's here, it's visceral. I think we feel it every moment. How many of us are sickened by the fact that you cannot go through 3 days without seeing something in the news cycle that affects you at a gut level and affects you personally? It's enough. And I feel like the world leaders also have not been the people that we need them to be. No one's been able to show up and say enough. I don't know who the adults in the room are going to be, but I feel like each individual one here, each one of us can be the adult in the room. And I feel like here in Victoria, where we don't have the specter of bombs falling, we don't have huge swaths of our own population who can't live in the homes where they live, right? You don't have to leave Fairfield and move someplace else to a hotel because bombs are falling in Fairfield. But we do have a sense of goodness here that we've cultivated, all of us, for a very long time. And my hope is that we can get it together, at least here in Victoria, and be an example to others. I've started some listening circles with Muslims, Jews, Christians, and Baha'is. And what really came out of it was really remarkable to me is that when the Israelis and the Palestinians were in this small group together and can see the pain and see the intensity of the trauma that we all hold, we can see each other's humanity. I want us to see the essence of each of us, that we are all created in God's image. Palestinians deserve better, Israelis deserve better, and we can do better. And the one thing I can say, and I think every Jew would agree with me, is that as a Jew, we don't despair. It's not part of what we can ever do. We maintain hope, we maintain dignity, and we move forward. But my hope is that we hold on to our deep moral understanding. We understand that we can find a path of goodness. And I know it's going to take some time. But right now, I think among everything, probably the biggest thing we need is a sense of finding out how to have that sense of quiet and not be manipulated by fear, to up our faith, because we don't need to be afraid. We need to be strong, and we need to be able to begin to make peace. And the last piece I want to say about shalom is this. And there's a lot of teachings in Talmud around the word shalom. Shalom doesn't mean peace. Shalom also means wholeness. But one of the things that is really, to me, very important is that in the realm of absolute justice, there is no shalom. No side in this conflict is going to get everything that they want. But we can get what we need. And we can get what we need in order to be able to move forward. But I hope that here in Victoria, we can be an example of doing things differently. And that can spread all across our planet. Thank you.
כמו נוצר ברוח הפראית, כמו אמצא אותך במקום שהיית. לפעמים עולה בי את קולך, והוא חוזר אליי, והוא בא לפעמים את יודעת, רק הבכי מזמן מזמן, פעם מתוך געגוע ישן. רוצה נלקחת עם הרוח מחלון פתוח לרווחה ורק ביקשת לנוח. הוא לא ידע, הוא לא שמע אותך בוכה, כאילו לא נרגע כל צחוקך המשוגע. לפעמים את יודעת, רק הבכי מזמן לזמן בא מתוך געגוע, אל מול עיניי היית נוצה ברוח. לפעמים את יודעת, רק הבכי מזמן לזמן בא מתוך געגוע ישן.
Thank you very much, Annabelle Wind and Darcy Phillips. Our next speaker is Dr. Ted Rosenberg. He's a prominent gerontologist. He specializes in home-based care. The Times columnist calls his medical model a geriatric game changer. This past January, Dr. Rosenberg made headlines when he resigned from teaching at UBC, where he taught for 30 years at the Faculty of Medicine. He resigned, he said, because of anti-Semitism within the faculty and on campus, and the university's reluctance to do anything about it. Dr. Rosenberg was recently in Israel on a mission with Doctors Against Racism and Anti-Semitism, and he has much to tell us, and I'm looking forward to it. Dr. Ted Rosenberg.
Wow. I want to start by saying Rabbi Harry's a tough act to follow. I do not have PowerPoint with me like most doctors, so I've got my written notes here, so please bear with me. I want to start. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect, sorry about that. Okay, I want to start by saying I was warned not to speak at this rally, that it would be dangerous. And when we were on our way here, my wife said, "Do you think you should have brought a scarf to wrap around your head?" And I said, "I'm not sure if the rabbis would allow a tallit to be wrapped around my face." So why does an internationally respected 82-year-old human rights lawyer, Irwin Cotler, and former Minister of Higher Education for BC, Selena Robinson, need 24-hour police protection? Okay. Why were 500 doctors from Ontario, some of them winning the Order of Canada, similarly threatened, doxxed, and victims of a malicious campaign to rescind their medical licenses? Why was I and other academic physicians across Canada the target of a campaign to ban us from participating in selection of medical students for postgraduate programs, being called racist? I'm only a physician who dedicated the past 30 years of my life to caring for elderly people in their homes and supporting their caregivers and families. Do I sound like someone who supports genocide? I'm a physician who spent the first 5 years of my career working in remote First Nation communities before it was sexy. Do I sound like someone who supports white European settler colonialism? No. I spent 5 additional years training in public health so that I could learn the determinants of health and disease and do research for prevention to plan and evaluate health programs. Does that sound like someone who would advocate planning deliberate starvation of a whole population or support intentionally killing women and children? No. Okay. Thank you. My wife is from southern India. My children are quote-unquote BIPOC. Would we have remained married for 42 years if I was a racist and supported an apartheid regime? Think about that. Why would the haters and their supporters, the politicians, the union leaders, the artists, the clergy, the professional colleagues, my professional colleagues, use these odious descriptions for people like me, accuse me of being the supporter of a white, European, settler, colonial, apartheid, racist, genocidal regime. Sounds like the old Campbell soup commercial. What a mouthful. I will tell you the answer, and there's one answer. It's because I'm Jewish, and 80% of the Jews in the world support the right of the legitimacy of the State of Israel, the ancestral indigenous Jewish homeland, and the right for the State of Israel to live in peace and defend itself when threatened by genocidal neighbors determined to wipe it off the map. Have the haters ever stopped to consider why the State of Israel is consistently ranked as the 4th or 5th happiest country in the whole wide world by none other than the UN-sponsored World Happiness Report? I can tell you from my lived experience that it's not because they are a settler, colonial, racist genocidaires who take pleasure in war or oppression or killing anyone. I'd like to share my recent experience as part of a group of 17 physicians, largely from Ontario and one straggler from BC, myself, who went to Israel on a medical mission sponsored by Doctors Against Racism and Anti-Semitism, also known as DARA. As you all know, Hamas terrorists invaded Israel on October 7th with the sole aim of slaughtering and kidnapping Jews. Facts ignored or sadly celebrated by the haters. The ferocity and glee with which they did so and their determination to repeat it over and over again, combined with massive security failure, left Israelis numb with grief and vulnerability, a nation struggling with PTSD. We observed Israelis still shocked and traumatized, but dedicated to supporting one another, even when their government falls short. We visited Magen David Adom, the National Ambulance and Blood Transfusion Service. There we met Ronit, a triage dispatcher who fielded frantic calls coming from besieged communities on October 7th. She related her harrowing telephone conversation with a paramedic in one of the villages, begging her to send more support. This paramedic, short on supplies and suffering with her own gunshot wounds to her thigh, was trying to provide first aid to wounded civilians in a dental clinic. Ronit's eyes lowered and her voice broke when she described telling her colleague that the roads were still dangerous, resources were exhausted, and they would not be able to send help soon. This woman was later found with a bullet in her head in the community. Anguished and helpless, dispatchers continued providing advice and comfort to the trapped and wounded. She played a recorded conversation with Guy, a young man dying of gunshot wounds, who they connected to his father so that he could express his love and gratitude to his parents and say goodbye as he drew his last breaths. We heard a recording of a dispatcher calming and advising a nine-year-old boy who was hiding in a safe room after witnessing the murder and abduction of his family members. Healthcare has long been considered a bridge to peace. We met Dr. Ora Paltiel, a hematologist, an epidemiologist at Jerusalem's Hadassah Hospital, who spoke first and foremost about her sense of duty and her fear for the fate of her cancer patients who lived in the West Bank and Gaza who could not get in for treatment. Indeed, many of the kibbutz residents murdered on October 7th, like Vivian Silver, were peace activists who routinely drove children from Gaza to medical appointments in Israel. Does this sound like a nation committed to genocide to you? We learned that up to half of the medical professionals in Israel are Muslims, Christians, and Druze. Those are the professionals, the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists. These dedicated professionals shared with us the complexities of their identities, how they're at once repulsed by Hamas's crimes and hateful ideology, while simultaneously terrified for civilians trapped in Gaza, some of whom are their own relatives. The head of occupational therapy at Hadassah Mount Scopus Hospital in Jerusalem, Labna, A Palestinian-Israeli citizen proudly showed us the brand new state-of-the-art rehabilitation facility where she treats both wounded civilians and soldiers. Is this apartheid? Physicians at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba had to innovate to save unprecedented life-threatening mass casualties. They were arriving every 40 seconds on October 7th. Imagine that. People with gunshot wounds to their chest, to their abdomen, to their heads. We found, and they described about collaborating with engineers from Ben Gurion University who found ways to 3D print facial structures and rebuild people's faces from gunshot wounds. And they redesigned vials of to protect morphine from breaking in the field. Elsewhere, we saw 200-bed underground hospitals with a month of supplies, oxygen, fluids, water, etc., and blood banks, rapidly built 3 stories below ground to survive precision-guided missile barrages from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Think about that. Those all came up in a couple of months. Our trip was a roller coaster of highs and lows. You heard about the Supernova Festival containing pictures and memorials of smiling teenagers and young adults, victims of brutal rapes, mutilations, and murders. Looking at the sparse surrounding trees in the so-called forest, we imagine them vainly trying to escape from their relentless predators. And this is what really struck me. I saw a poster there at the Supernova Festival stating, "We will dance again," a testimony to the spirit and hope of the Israeli people. Shuva, a nearby moshav, set up a restaurant and store ad hoc at a highway junction near the Gaza border, supplying free food, drink, clothing, toiletries for exhausted soldiers entering and returning from Gaza just a few kilometers away. The premises were decorated with local artwork and felt like a trendy cafe. We met a young soldier there with glazed eyes who told us about escaping his town of Ofakim near the border after hiding his mother first and witnessing his civilian brother's murder, running to join his tank unit at a nearby base at Nahal Oz that was also overrun. We went to Hostages Square outside the Museum of Art in Tel Aviv. There we saw posters of Kfir Bibas, who passed his first birthday in captivity, smiling and holding a toy, not in captivity, but on his poster. We saw Sahar Baruch, 24, looking like John Lennon to me, with long, flowing and a beard and sunglasses, and Oded Lifshitz, an 83-year-old peace activist wearing a flat cap, smartphone weighing down his shirt pocket, and an optimistic glint in his eyes. In fact, we put Oded's picture on at our Seder table this year. Affected families sat in tents and were surrounded by art installations dedicated to the hostages. They shared their grief about murdered friends, anxiety about their loved ones languishing in tunnels, bewilderment about the massive security failure, and hope for their rescue in the future. There were no cries of revenge, only lamentation, sadness, and gratitude to us for supporting them when they thought they'd been abandoned by the world. Leaders at the Hebrew University excitedly told us about their world-renowned research that combined basic medical science with clinical care, engineering, and work from other disciplines. They linked their discoveries to business innovation accelerators and create startups to ensure that their medical breakthroughs are translated and disseminated. The academic physicians and researchers we met with spoke about the challenges they now face, collaborating internationally in an increasingly hostile and demonizing climate which advocates for boycott of Israel academics. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like UVic and UBC? I was taken to the military cemetery at Mount Herzl by Professor Mati Fox, a radiologist and medical ethicist. There we saw 300 freshly dug graves adorned with pictures, t-shirts, CDs, artwork, favorite beer bottles. He took me to his nephew, Ben Sussman's grave, where we both wept. We went to the New Israel National Library, which opened October 29th, a couple of weeks after the atrocities. That did not stop them from opening this world-class library with ancient manuscripts and books that have all been digitized. Throughout our journey in Israel, we observed a complex, nuanced reality that is a stark contrast to the activist press narratives and the shallow TikTok sound bites. We left with a clear understanding of Israel, rife with internal divisions. And surrounded by hostile neighbors bent on their destruction, was rated as the 5th happiest country in the world. We understood it. Its people seemed united by a can-do attitude and fierce love of life and community. Paradoxically, we left Israel feeling much more reassured about the future of Israel than our very own country, Canada. Where do we go from here? I won't lie to you. There are times when I feel like I'm on a roller coaster of emotions. Shock and disgust, anger and frustration, fear and despair, and the sadness and exhaustion they bring. But never lose sight of the beauty, the meaning, and the kindness that surrounds all of us. My patients and family, and my good fortune to practice medicine remind me why I've been put on this earth. I'll never forget an Egyptian friend who repeatedly called me after October 7th to check in and make sure I was okay, and other non-Jewish friends who also checked in. As Rabbi Harry told you, we are not haters, and we will not be turned into haters. Rabbi Lynn taught us to stand up to bullies against lies and aggression. Rabbi Harry taught us to never lose our compassion, our humility, our sense of shared humanity, or stop being rodef l'shalom, pursuers of peace. Rabbi Meir taught us to never lose sight of the joy in our religion and lives, even in the very darkest times. A non-Jewish friend told me their granddaughter decided not to have children because of the irredeemable state of the world. I told them to tell her that babies were born and survived in the Holocaust, and 6 survivors won Nobel Prizes. I do not forget, and we should never forget, the people lit candles, Shabbat candles, in the Warsaw Ghetto, and were reciting the Passover Haggadah when the Nazis stormed. Our enemies in the Middle East laugh at us and say we are weak because we love life. Imagine that. We love life too much. They are wrong. That is what makes us strong, and that is why we survive.
Yeah. Yes.
The haters, the professors and their students, the shepherds and the sheep, taking part over parts of our university, accuse us of being on the wrong side of history. How many times have you heard that? Well, I have news for them. We survived the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Spanish Inquisition, Tsarist pogroms, Marxist Soviet Union, and the Nazis' final solution. And guess what? We're still here. I have 3 words for these people filled with hate and obsessed with hateful delusions. What are those 3 words? Louder. Thank you. I want to end with a few recommendations. First of all, for the younger people, recognize and stay away from the haters and baiters. You will recognize them 2 ways. Number 1, they deny the legitimacy of the state of Israel. Someone says Israel has no right to exist, walk away. The other is they support Hamas, indicating that they've completely lost their moral compasses. For everyone else, don't give up on respectful, empathetic dialogue when that opportunity arises. Yesterday, I sent in a letter to the Lutheran Church after driving by and seeing on their billboard that pray for the students at the universities, at the university encampments. And I wrote a fairly strong letter back to the church. I've sent it into the Times columnist, and it's already circulating on Twitter. But I want you to know that I have a very close friend who's a Lutheran minister. And I haven't talked to him since this war started. And I've been nervous to because I like him. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. And out of respect to him, I sent him a copy of this letter I sent to the Lutheran church. And he sent me a beautiful note back saying that he does not agree with what is happening. He supports us And again, it's an example when you start a conversation, a difficult conversation, from a point of humility and empathy, it's amazing what we can do together. Don't be afraid, don't be intimidated, and don't be bullied. Write to our leaders of our institutions and elected representatives. Only when we stand up and be counted will we be able to stop this hatred, take back our streets, our universities, our theaters, our shops, places of worship, and public square. Let's restore Canada to its place of peace and tolerance and respect in civil discourse.
Yeah.
Finally, I'll say, don't let the haters tear the Canadian tapestry apart.
Well said.
Well done, Dr. Rosenberg. Thank you so much. I think we all needed to hear what you had to say. Our next speaker is Tim Thielman. He's a Victoria lawyer who's worked with First Nations for the past 15 years. Tim is hoping to use his expertise in the BC legislature as an MLA. He's running in the next provincial election. Tim is also an outspoken champion of the Jewish community, calling out anti-Semitism and speaking up for Israel. He's had a busy few months. Tim?
Thank you. I'm very honored to be speaking with you today, to be here. What an inspiration. Thank you, Dr. Ted. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Rabbi Harry. I want to speak about some facts today. I won't be speaking about Israel. Not really. I'm here today to speak about Canada and about the law. I'm a lawyer. I've worked with Indigenous people for about 15 years, and as Lindy just mentioned, I recently sought the nomination and I'm the Conservative Party of BC candidate here in Victoria. So when I announced in November, like many of you, we had been seeing since October, rallies every week within days of the October the 7th massacres. And not just rallies, these weren't just demonstrations. What we were seeing were speeches that were glorifying and explicitly praising Hamas murderers. We were seeing chants that included calls for another intifada. We were seeing hordes of protesters marching down Victoria streets, obstructing and blocking traffic, and shouting these hateful chants and intimidating threats at Jews and other members of the public every week since October the 7th. And I didn't know what to do, like many of you, I'm sure. And I thought, well, there's not much I can do, but what can I offer? Well, I started just by expressing myself. I called publicly for investigations, for arrests. It was obvious to me that these actions were illegal. Nothing happened. I encouraged my party and we commenced a petition, which many of you probably signed, thank you, to call for these investigations into what appeared to be unlawful actions. I wrote to the Victoria Police and asked them to investigate these apparent legal violations, and nothing happened. And then in March, the spring, we heard rumors that maybe the police weren't acting because they believed the prosecution service wouldn't prosecute if they did. And I don't know if that's true or not, but ultimately it doesn't matter because there's always an excuse for courage to wait. There's always another day to do the right thing. So I did what lawyers do. I sat down, I holed myself up in the office for a few days, and I wrote a memo. I said, well, I'm going to figure out what's going on here. And it got a little out of hand. It's 26 pages long. And it looked at all of the evidence that has been collected. There have been citizen journalists like Charles Bodie, who I believe is here, and others that have documented what's been happening every week. And, you know, seeing the speeches that I referenced and the chants and the obstructions and the harassment of people just for holding Jewish flags, and the assaults that have been documented. You know, Rabbi Lynn's partner has experienced this. So, you know, I put all the evidence together and I looked at the law and I wrote a memo and it's been given to Chief Delmanic of the Victoria Police, and it's now made its way to the Attorney General's office and Nikki Sharma as well. And here's what it says. So here's what it says. I hope you've got another 2 hours. It is 20, no. So I'll give you the short version. The good news, yeah, exactly. The first point is, we don't even have to talk about hate speech if we don't want to. Because Section 430, are you all writing this down? Section 430 says that it's unlawful to obstruct people in the use of their property. So you can't just block people from driving their cars down the road. Amen. Section 423 says it's unlawful to obstruct or block a highway. Woo! And that doesn't just mean highways. So all those of you looking for loopholes, you aspiring lawyers, any street that the public has access to is a highway. Okay, that means Government Street is a highway. Johnson Street is a highway, and Douglas, of course, is a highway. So that's illegal, for obvious reasons. You know, I may not like the maple tree in my neighbor's backyard, but I can't block their driveway until they cut it down. It's just not the way it works. We have processes for expressing ourselves. And so, some of you might be asking, but isn't there a constitutional right to protest wherever I want? Can't I just block a street whenever I want to if I've got a cause that I think is just? And the answer is no. No, you can't. No, you can't. And so, well, how do I know that? Well, you don't have to ask me. You can ask the judge in R versus Breen, which was decided so long ago. Actually, last year it was decided. It's a new case. It's very recent. And what happened there? Well, the Nanaimo police, they found the courage of their convictions when some old-growth logging protesters blocked the highway for a number of hours. Not for 6 months, for a number of hours. They arrested them. They said, I'm sorry, people need to get places. They have things to do. And so they arrested them, and the protesters went and hired a lawyer. I don't know who it was, it doesn't matter. And the lawyer said, well, we have a charter right here to do this. And the judge said, no, you don't. Because you had other places to go to express your opinions about old-growth logging. And other people have the right to go about their business as well. And there are impacts that have to be considered. We live in a society. You know, there are emergency vehicles that use these streets. There are people that may need to get to the hospital. And so, it's not the case that the police don't have the law on their side. And that was evident, in fact, in the past. You know, we've seen the police break up protests when they believe the public is behind them and the law is behind them. You know, when during COVID, trucks were stopped simply for flying Canadian flags. Now, it doesn't matter what your view on that is. The point is here that if the police believe the law is behind them and the public is behind them, they will find the courage of their convictions. And so we don't even have to talk about hate speech, but we can. Because the criminal code also contains these provisions. So section 319, I hope you got your pencils out again. 319, 1. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. So 1, hate speech is any public statements against an identifiable group that are likely to cause an imminent breach of the peace. So when you're marching with hundreds strong with masked protesters illegally down streets calling for an intifada revolution, That's a public statement. That's against an identifiable group, Jews, Zionists, take your pick. And that's obviously likely to cause an imminent breach of the peace, because it isn't an imminent breach of the peace. You're breaching the peace when you're blocking the traffic. That is what a breach of the peace is. And how do police know that this is going to occur? Because they've been meeting with protesters every week. So they know that this is happening, and up until now, they've been giving them private escorting services at the cost of the public, and that has to stop. Because we don't pay the police to facilitate hate speech or the obstruction of highways and the use of personal property.
Right on!
So third, so we didn't need to talk about hate speech, but that's being violated, in my opinion, repeatedly, with the assistance of the police. That's going to stop. We didn't have to talk about highways. We have. Thirdly, terrorism. Yeah, terrorism. We have laws against terrorism, lots of them in the criminal code, and some of them, frankly, I have concerns about. Same with hate speech. You know, hate speech can be abused by those that hate speech. It's true. You know, we want to have free speech, but here's the thing, in my opinion. When you call for violence, that is the antithesis of promoting free speech. Because free speech ends when violence begins. So anyway, back to terrorism. Yeah, thank you. Is there evidence of criminal violations of our terrorism provisions happening? I believe there is. Hamas is a listed terrorist group in the criminal code, and facilitating the actions of any terrorist group, directly or indirectly, is a criminal offense. That's section 8318, sub 1, for those of you who got your pencils out still. So how do we know that's happening? Well, first of all, it's not my job to do this work, and it's not Charles Bodie's job, and it's not any of your job to do it, but everybody has to ask, what can I offer? And there's a lot of evidence of this. So we have, for example, one of the first things that concerned me as I became aware of some of these issues last fall is I came across this imam named Katrada. Some of you might have heard of him. He, since 2018, has been preaching just the most odious forms of anti-Jewish hatred that you could imagine. He has publicly called for the, quote, annihilation of the plundering Jews. Yep. And since October the 7th, he has been, by a landslide, the most prominent and outspoken advocate in Victoria for the actions and atrocities of Hamas. Mm-hmm. And so every month, he preaches at I believe it's the Dar al-Ihsan Islamic Center. Every month, the Muslim Youth of Victoria group posts his sermons on Facebook to over 25,000 followers. And he openly praises Hamas martyrs. He castigates his congregation for daring to question the glory of their actions. And so you have the most obvious forms of, and he has also encouraged members to donate to the cause. So, in my opinion, as a lawyer, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, that looks to me like the facilitation of terror.
Yes, it is.
And what I saw, just to put a bit of a cap on this, 3 days ago, it was reported again by Mr. Bodie on his X account publicly that Katrada, this imam, met a year ago with 3 members of the UVic Muslim Society, who are also simultaneously among the organizers. I'm not sure if they're with us today. Among the organizers of these weekly demonstrations, these pro-Hamas, anti-Israel demonstrations. I'm being given the curtains here.
Keep going. Keep going.
No, I'm going to wrap it up. So the point is, you've now got the gist of the 26-page legal memo. The threat is real.
Yes, it is.
The law is clear.
Yes, it is.
But the evidence is in, so it's time for courage. It's time for courage. Who here is going to encourage the Victoria Police to do the right thing? Who here is going to stand with their neighbors, with their Jewish community, with the entire public, to stand for the rule of law in Victoria? Thank you. Shalom.
Thank you so much. Let's open a window into a world of light and happiness. הנה פתחתי חלון אל העולם המואר, תקשיב עכשיו איך הולך אם לא לי ודאי לך, תקשיב עכשיו איך הוא שר, אם לא לי ודאי לך, הנה מרוץ שעות קווים ושוב נדלקים אורות נפרדים מאורות ואנחנו עוד לא נפרדים, אורות נפרדים מאורות ואנחנו עוד לא נפרדים, כולך שותק לי שותק וגם גופי מתרוקן, עלילתי כמו הנצח, לוקח כלי ומנגן, לוקח כלי again, Darcy Phillips. הנה פתחתי חלום אל העולם המואר, תקשיב עכשיו איך הוא שר, אם לא לי ודאי לך, אז תקשיב עכשיו איך הוא שר, אם לא לי ודאי לך, הנה מרוץ של אורות קווים ושוב נדלקים, אורות נפרדים מאורות ואנחנו עוד לא נפרדים, אורות נפרדים מאורות ואנחנו עוד לא נפרדים, גופך שותק לי שותק לבן וגם גופי מתרוקן, עלילתי כמו הנצח, לוקח כביש כחלום, כן העולם הבא, תקשיב עכשיו, איך הוא שם, אז תקשיב עכשיו, איך הוא שם, אם לא לבדי לכם.
Thank you very much to Annabelle Wynn and Darcy Phillips. We're nearing the end of our program. I know it's getting really chilly. But I was telling you about how candid and frank Israelis are. Well, someone who's Canadian born said to me, could you get the speakers to speed it up a little? So, with that in mind, if you're willing to trim their speeches just a tad, I will request that. We have just 2 more speakers to go. I'm going to invite Chrissy Mizrahi to join me. She is a teacher, at Vancouver Hebrew Academy. She's also the niece of retired Israeli journalist Oded Lifshitz. Now you heard Dr. Ted Rosenberg talk about Oded Lifshitz. He and his wife lived near the border with Gaza, and they were kidnapped during the massacre on October 7th. Ruthie's aunt has been released, but Oded remains in captivity, and he's 84 years old. Ruthie?
Hi, so my name is Ruthie Mizrahi. I was born and raised in the beautiful state of Israel. Okay, better? I'm a second generation of Israeli born, a real indigenous of the land of Israel. My beautiful beloved country is in deep pain. On the morning of October 7th, hundreds of terrorists attacked different places in the southern area of Israel. Around 6:30 a.m., my aunt Yochke and my uncle Oded Lifshitz woke up in their safe room in Kibbutz Nir Oz. The terrorists were outside their home and then went inside. My uncle, 83 years old, was holding the door but was shot by the terrorists. They threw him out of on the hard cement while rolling my aunt, 85 years old, in a carpet and throwing her on a motorcycle, taking her to Gaza. My aunt Yochke was lucky and was returned to Israel after 17 days. She was sure Oded was murdered on October 7th, but later we learned he was badly wounded but was alive, at least for a while. Let me tell you about Oded. He's an 83 years old. He was born and raised in Haifa. Both him and my aunt were pioneers. They built this beautiful little oasis that was Kibbutz Nir Oz and lived there for almost 60 years. Oded, by the way, is one of the most intelligent persons I've ever met. Oded is a person of words, and that's what led him to become a successful journalist, but he's also a man of integrity and actions. He always believed in justice and humanity, and fought for human rights, no matter of religion, nationality, or gender. One example is his fight for the Bedouin rights on their land that was taken from them in Gaza Strip in the 70s. He used to have Palestinians and Bedouin friends in Gaza Strip. He used to volunteer taking Palestinian cancer patients to get treatment in a hospital in Israel and driving them back after the treatment was done. Oded, in my head, I have many conversations with you because I have so much I want to tell you. You really believed in peace and did whatever you could make or do to make sure that justice was done and spoke for peace and justice. extended family, meaning the whole kibbutz near Oz, and your country went through on October 7th. After your friends and neighbors that were like a family to you were brutally murdered, burned, raped, and some others, just like you, were taken away by the terrorists. How do you feel now after you open your houses by giving those people work, and then on October 7th, they led the terrorists directly into your home? Some of them were among the killers. Some of them stole everything they could, and some of them burned down your home. Your home, the kibbutz that you cultivated for almost 60 years. The truth is that I'm not sure your opinion would change, at least not completely. I believe that you will still do whatever you can to help people in need. You are a true Zionist, always been. You didn't believe in terror groups. You knew and understood, and you still, that they are a threat to people on both sides. The people on both sides of the border are suffering from those barbarians. Oded, both of you and Yoshke, always been such an amazing aunt and uncle. Your home was always open to everyone. I used to spend all my holidays near Oz, and I have such an amazing memories from them. You and Yochke raised an amazing family. I wish you knew how much they are all doing to bring you and the rest home. Your kids, grandkids, and others are going all around the world and doing whatever they can do to help bring you home. We are all heartbroken. We are all missing you, and mostly bored. We are all frustrated with the situation and very upset with the government that's not doing even close to enough to make it happen. But we cannot give up. Next week, on May 11th, will be your 84th birthday. While I can't understand or accept the fact that someone can do such a horrible thing to another human being, I allow myself to hope you'll be back by then and we will celebrate your birthday, you and your family. Last time we met was in July when you and Yochta came to see me on my last visit to Israel. But then my wish is that that wasn't our last visit. Tonight is Erev Yom HaShoah, Israel Holocaust Memorial Day. I come from a family who lost almost everyone who murdered by the Nazis. My mother is a Holocaust survivor. I look around and see what is going on these days with this sick world. The evils becomes the good, while the victims become the bad. I'm saying it here and now, never again. I will not let hope die. In a few days, we are going to celebrate Israel's 76th Independence Day. This year, it's going to be the hardest Yom HaAtzmaut ever. It's hard because of what happened on October 7th and because of the political situation. However, I believe we will overcome these hard times as always have in the past. Our history is full of horrible events and memories. The young people today doesn't have the knowledge or understanding of the fact, and they've been brainwashed with wrong facts. They need to learn the true fact. The people of Israel has been living in the land of Israel for thousands of years, way before any Palestinian. We are the real indigenous people of this land, and most of us want to live in peace. Actually, the name Palestine Palestine was given by the Roman occupiers. There is no connection between the people who call themselves Palestinians and this area. The Jewish people were granted this place by the UN after the Holocaust, when it was finally understood the need of the Jewish people to have a safe place, a place to call it home. Israel is only 76, but in these 76 years established so much in different areas like agriculture, medicine, technology, etc. Yes, we have issues, but with the right leadership, we can overcome them. From here in Victoria, the capital city of beautiful BC, I call the Canadian government, including the government of BC, stop the madness that is happening in our cities and on universities across the country and do what is right. None of our children, regardless of their religious, should have to feel hated or be afraid to go to school because they are being bullied like the Jewish kid feels these days. And I'm calling on the Israeli government and the rest of the world, open your eyes and bring them home now. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruthie. Our final speaker is Rabbi Lynn Greenhow. Rabbi Lynn is a spiritual leader of Kolot Bayim Reform Congregation. She's a passionate and tireless advocate for the Jewish community and for Israel. And I'm so proud that she's here. Rabbi Lynn.
So I wrote my speech imagining that May would bring us sunny days. And we're all here to support Israel. I thought at least if the weather could cooperate, the Mossad agents would bring a little sunshine, but not to be. When we were asked to speak today, we were asked to provide facts. However, those of us that believe Israel has a right to exist in peace, as much as Canada does, as Spain does, as the United States of America does, as Uzbekistan does, we've been providing facts since October 7th and long prior. I'm no longer convinced facts matter. It doesn't matter how often we speak of Jews living in Israel for thousands of years. It doesn't matter what ancient texts we cite. Facts just don't seem to matter. Reason and rational argument don't seem to matter either. When we watch video clips of students and professional Islamist agitators across North American campuses, when you see the signs and you hear the chants, when you see the keffiyehs worn, not for COVID, can we please set that aside? For protection against surveillance, self-admittedly, you know facts don't matter. So we have a problem. The susceptibility to Islamist fundamentalism affecting so many of our students tells us we have a big problem. Because their emotions seem to matter more than any victims here. Hamas knows facts don't matter. Whatever numbers they provide are immediately believed, whilst we know that Israeli women savagely raped by those same Hamas murderers are not believed. Not believed here, not believed anywhere but in Israel. If facts mattered, we would not see rape assault centers refusing to believe those women and instead substituting Islamist terrorists on International Women's Day. Who knew that being a victim would be our biggest problem? Israelis are not victims. Women are not victims. As a cartoon on Aaron's door at work has stated for years, no matter how well qualified you may be, victim is never a good career choice. but it does seem to be a good political strategy. Let me state a fact here. I may have Islamophobia. I do have real fear of Islamists, not Muslims, Islamists. An endless string of known Islamist terrorist groups killing Jews, Christians, and mostly other Muslims would support a very realistic cautionary fear.
Yeah.
So, if there are any moderate Muslims here in support of Israel, please show your hands, because we need to know you are with us too. Or are you also afraid of your own people? We need to yell our truth from our rooftops. We are proud of our Judaism. We are proud to be Jews. We are proud of Israel. We are proud to be Zionists. We are a free and brave people. And a fact, sidebar, we do not throw gays from those rooftops. I'm sorry, we can recite facts till the cows come home. We can fact claim Jews were indigenous to Israel. I'm going to say something that may offend some of you. I'm sorry. We have lived on that precious land, on that soil to which our festivals are linked, our prayer cycle is linked for long enough. And long enough is good enough. Yes. We have reclaimed that land. Enough is enough. I'm the closer, folks. Can you tell? Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo! I'm mad. They got me really mad now. Woo-hoo! Facts are important, but they don't tell the whole truth. Think of truth as the room, and facts as the furniture. Truth tells the big picture. Facts are useful, but we live in truth. And our truth is so much bigger than how we die. It's Yom HaShoah. Our truth is bigger than the Shoah, the exiles, the ghettos, the blood libels. Our truth is our lives, our joy, our resilience. Facts are corporate punishment. Truth is corporate life. So let's tell that story. Let's tell the world and our children who we are, why we are, how we are. We need to recalibrate here, people. Facts are not the truth. I teach Torah every week, and I often reiterate this. Truth can exist within Torah, even if the words are not literally, factually true. We don't read Torah literally. It's impossible to read Torah literally. So let's not treat our lives, this living Torah, literally. We've made a massive error. We all need to hold the truth and speak with truth. Facts are getting us nowhere. Facts are just the beginning. I'm going to edit this a little, sunny ways. Facts tell us that the Arabs, Hamas, Arafat, Hezbollah, all have refused endless offerings of peace accords. Truth tells us they never wanted to sign, and they don't want to sign a peace agreement because they don't want to recognize Israel. This was never about land. This was never about sharing that land. Facts also tell us there's no Jews in Gaza, and constant criticism of Jewish settlements in the West Bank. Truth asks, why this inconsistency? Why should Arab Palestinians live in Israel, and I'm fine, live in Israel, but Jews should not live within those other borders? Truth asks those inconvenient questions. Truth wants to get to the bone and not just the facts on the surface. Facts look for equal opportunity. Facts look for equity. There is no equity in truth. Truth stands on its own. There is cowardice and hate. I don't want or need equity with cowardice and hate. We know the facts of the Hamas Charter. The facts are easy to find and horrifying to read. There's no equity in from the river to the sea. The truth is, it isn't just Israel, it isn't Netanyahu, it isn't the Zionists. The truth is, there's a great swollen river of hatred for Jews. Facts are the skeletal structure of how we know our reality. They're useful, they're necessary. But as anyone who has looked through Ripley's Believe It or Not book of facts, facts are just the beginning. Any statistics prof can tell you facts. Statistics can get skewed to tell any story, different stories. What we need to be doing is speaking truth and moving forward in truth. One of my objections, one of my fierce objections to the omnipresence of faces obscured by keffiyeh is that they're used to hide and obscure faces. The keffiyeh is a fact. The truth is it's a symbol of moral cowardice. Those trolls do not want to be identified. I personally think they don't want their mothers to know. They're hiding from the consequences of their behavior. Their shame is drowning us in Jew hatred. Every Zionist I know, look around the room. Is anybody hiding their face? Not a single person here is hiding their face. Every Zionist I know keeps their face open to this world. We use our names. Honesty leads us closer to truth than hiding who we are. Truth is hard to find sometimes. It's often found in interpretation of the facts. Facts is, there are Palestinians who are willing to live with a peace deal. The truth is they're vastly outnumbered by those who want to keep the war going. Demography is true. Here's a fact and a truth. Many of the students, many of these young Jewish students that we know are in those camps dotted all over North America, including you, Vic, they're abandoning us because we are Zionists. Believe it or not, truth. Our facts and our truths are being abandoned. The truth is we must reimagine and rebuild Israel, our Israel here. We must support Israel in Israel. We must find a way to bring our young people home, as well as the hostages. Our young people have been caught up in a fairy tale of victim oppression. We must build a story that's not predicated on victimhood, shared or otherwise. We need to all stand in fact and truth. Israel must live. Jews must live. We gave the world the greatest gift imaginable. We gave the world Torah, and Torah is tough. We must be tough. God warns us over and over again in Torah to not worship idols. We must find a way to bring our young people back from their idols. Social justice in a moral vacuum is anarchy. Bring them home. Hostages in Gaza, and every hostage to every false truth, every idol of their imagination. Bring them home. Israel high. Rabbi Lynn Greenhow, our warrior queen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Lynn. We're going to conclude today's rally. I would like to thank all of you for attending. We appreciate it so much. It was great to all be together supporting Israel. I also want to thank all of our speakers. We thank the police. Remind everyone that Sheer is going
See you soon.
Thank you so much. And I'm wildly in love with Israel. I've been there 3 times. And my first words when I got to Canada was down to it. Because I'm connected in the beginning of time back to Adam.
Really big.
And then
Don't you miss the cold?
not at all. I love you.
כאן את הזום לייב מרחבת הפרלמנט בוויקטוריה. פעם רלי למען ישראל בערב יום השואה. 212 ימים בשבי חמאס, 130